Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Modern Market. This is our daily show from Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, 12 p.m. BST, every day of the week, where we discuss all things to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and any other market that might facilitate some profit making and taking on the internet. I'm your host, B-Check. I'm joined by my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Some very interesting points of discussion too. Some pretty comical ones as well. Pretty outrageous blasts from the past we're going to be bringing up today. Hope you are ready for that. But just a reminder, as we go through that, nothing that we say here is financial advice because we do not know anything for sure. So please do exercise your own judgment and proceed with caution. And take that all into account. That is out of the way. It is Friday. It is close to the weekend. We're bringing the weekend in. Legendary, how are you doing as we close this week?
GM. I'm super excited for the weekend, and Sammy knows exactly why. Cambria is opening up the fighting pits. It's time for some good old NPC wagering. And also the stars are aligning because these NPC bets, they happen at every full hour. So you basically have to stay locked in as always. And the beauty of it is that my girlfriend is flying out tomorrow. She's going on holiday. So I don't even need to have like a guilty conscience for staying in the entire weekend, reducing sleep to a minimal amount to max those wagering gains over the weekend.
It sounds very productive. Sounds like you've been waiting for your girlfriend to leave so that you can get down to some proper Cambria
Campbell,
battling.
yeah. Isn't that a very healthy blast farming situation?
I guess so. I guess that is certainly one perspective. Sammy, I think you're secretly in the same boat, aren't you?
No, so Jace actually, she's worked in the week, so she's done nights, so she's around on the weekend. So I have a narrow opportunity of window, so I'm not going to have as much free time to max out every single hour of the weekend, but I'll definitely dedicate some time to it.
Oh, I more meant the secretly hoping that you would get more time. Secretly. I don't think she watches this show though, right?
Yeah, she does watch the show, and of course not. Yeah, of course not.
Got it. No, we are all optimizing for free time with our other halves, and we only do blast farming when that first part is taken care of. I'm still in the fatigue boat. Interestingly, I literally just wrote my newsletter today. It would have gone out to subscribers just 10 minutes ago. I know you guys are going full on pedal to the metal, full throttle. But I'm still in the boat of like, do you know what? The risk reward here is not as good as it was, because I've always put forward the idea that you need to be comparing this with time. So yes, you can get like millions and millions. Okay, you're not going to get millions of gold. Say you're going to get thousands of gold from this whole process, and gold continues to declining price. So, okay, is that maybe 10 grand for the next month of work? And if it is 10 grand for the next month of work, let's say this as an example, would I rather spend my time bringing in 10 grand of sponsorship for the show, which would be on a multi-month basis, or would I prefer to get 10 grand in my pocket from the buttons that I press? And bear in mind, it seems like people are going pretty hard at this. The people who I saw was like who were most looking forward to this on the timeline were the real grinders, like the people who really like to go at it, grateful that they've got the opportunity to get more, knowing that loads of other people are going to drop by the wayside now. Legendary, what's your reflection on that kind of that perspective that I'm kind of leaning towards, kind of comparing it versus time? Because I think everyone in the audience is thinking the same thing, right? That's always the case with airdrops. Like, how much time is it going to take? Is it going to be worth it? That's one way I'm thinking about it. What are you thinking?
In principle, very much agree with that. One addition would be that a lot of things like are multitasking. There's basically barely any call where I'm not farming some airdrop in the background. YOLO spins are running right now. So there is of course a massive advantage to securing deals for the show and having that on a multi-month basis. And I think this is where all our head is at.
Mm.
But you still can farm on top of that. I did have a couple conversations today with friends, traders who reached out to me to be like, yo, I wasn't on Blast, but since the TGE is postponed, I want to get on. I have 100K, I have 200K. What do I do? What is my best strategy? So that was interesting to see. I didn't expect that to happen. But
do you
I
think
still
that's
think
happening?
you have. Sorry?
Do you think that's happening because they see this as an opportunity? Like, look, all these other people who've been in are a bit fatigued. Let me come in with my bigger stack and like take the gold. So it's actually an opportunistic moment.
Yeah, I think that at least, I mean, it's not an empirically relevant group, right? It's just a couple of friends who reached out to me, but they seem to understand that the jackpot, in the way it works, helps to be a catch-up mechanism for those who are joining later, and that early depositors are a bit of a disadvantage right now versus the benefits that late joiners are getting. So this is probably what got them intrigued. But I do still think, and that's probably the reason why Sammy is doubling down on Cambria so hard, but he can speak to that to himself. It's just the progressive nature of it, because you're building up progressively, and every time you do that, it helps you for the next gold distribution, for the next gold distribution.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas you don't have that progressive nature with, I don't know, LPing somewhere. And I think that depending on what your blast farm has been, some people might be doubling down and some might be a bit more fatigued because they don't have that like progressive advantage / edge.
Okay. Yeah, I've definitely heard that kind of as one strategy to figure out a way forward now when there's more protocols, more people vying for your attention. Try to kind of double down on the thing that you are best at. Definitely know Sammy has been doing that with Cambria in particular. And partly that stems from just genuine enjoyment of a particular thing, right? Which is always helpful. Before we get to the headline today and get into the snapshot, maybe we'll just come to you, Sammy, for that same question. Like, any key reflections at the moment when you're thinking about your time as like a content creator versus this, and actually advisory in any other way, versus, you know, going for the gold and any other airdrop trading strategies you might be running at the moment?
I think they all come hand in hand. So a lot of the work that a lot of the content that I'll put out will probably be around the stuff that I'm doing, just because I know it best and that's where my attention is. And I think I've done stuff on Cambria, I've done a lot of stuff on Blast. That is where the bulk of my attention is. I think that like Fancy Top, super interesting. So I think for me personally, Fancy Top, Cambria, and there's a few other farms that I'm doing, or just protocols that I enjoy and I think have longevity. But ultimately, I'm also less fatigued because I think that everyone's focused on the TGE. It's like a full-on sprint. But actually, I think there's a lot of opportunity beyond that. I think that actually Blast and the Blast token will accrue a lot of value through the various incentives that's embedded or ingrained within like the operational infrastructure. And then you've also got applications that are subsidized or protocols that are subsidized that then have to worry less about preserving runway and can focus more on innovation. I think that's like a self-fulfilling prophecy to create these really interesting protocols or apps like Fancy Top or Cambria or other games or GambleFi protocols that have really interesting mechanics that keep people engaged. And I think that we'll see a lot of that. You'll see a lot of iteration and development. And I think that's what I'm kind of excited for. But I do get your point that you do need to you will experience burnout if you go full on, especially if you spread your attention too thinly across too many things and just feel like you're kind of just treading water. Whereas I think if you get ahead within a specific few, you then feel a bit more fulfilled to then make sure you allocate time to go out and enjoy the summer. Or for me, it's like recovery from my operation. Like I need to do physio, I need to get fit and healthy. That's a priority. So I think that there is definitely a balancing act, and that can be tricky for some people.
Yes, I really like the point that you made on the fact that this probably, like, look, we don't know anything for sure. We've obviously been bullish on Blast for a long period of time. We don't know that for sure either. But, you know, I guess one of the reasons that helps you to get through the time is like, well, it's not actually a sprint until the TG. People might be acting as if it's a sprint towards the TG, but there's probably some time and space after where the fact that this thing has native yield is genuinely kind of game changing and an interesting thing, which will have some longevity after TGE2. So I like that perspective. Legendary, you wanted to come back in on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about TG, I think one of the things we've been discussing, and Sammy, you reminded me of this actually, was projects launching their own tokens after the Blast TG versus pre-Blast TG, and how the jackpot should actually be an incentive to move forward with your token launch if you can realistically do so with market makers, et cetera, et cetera. And it seems that YOLO is doing that, and they changed their stance on it, because when the TG got postponed, their first reaction was to say, nope, we are still sticking with the initial plan to do our TGE post Blast TG. And yesterday they had the announcement that they actually want to squeeze it in before Blast TG and aiming for the first 2 weeks of June to exactly be able to have the token circulating and being in enough jackpot decks so that it potentially can win the gold distribution by the jackpot.
Okay, that's a really good point as well. Let's get into the headlines. Let's get into the snapshot. We've got a bunch of things to talk about today. We're going to hit the headlines as usual, and we've also got some bigger discussion points too. So as usual, this is coming to you from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. Let me zoom in for the people watching in on X and on YouTube. That is better. Let's do it. Starting with some price action. We've got Bitcoin consolidating where it got to yesterday, 66K. ETH is at 3K. Solana is up a few percent, almost at $170 now. First headline, world's largest futures exchange, CME, announces plans to launch BTC spot trading. This is the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Group, the world's largest futures exchange, announcing plans to launch Bitcoin spot trading. The move aims to capitalize on the increasing demand for cryptocurrency from Wall Street fund managers. The plan, which has not yet been finalized, comes as the CME seeks to expand its offerings beyond its existing futures products. Got to think that is a good move, but we'll touch on it briefly in a bit. Number 2, US Senate votes to repeal anti-crypto rules, which discourages institutions from holding crypto. This was the news that the US Senate has voted 60-38 to overturn the SEC's Staff Accounting Bulletin, a rule that discourages financial institutions from being custodians of digital assets like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. This bipartisan decision follows a similar vote in the House and now moves to President Biden's desk, where he has threatened to veto the bill. So we will now see what the move is there. And finally, Pudgy Penguins announced a strategic partnership with Lot Group, a South Korean conglomerate. Pudgy Penguins said that they've entered into a strategic partnership with Lot Group, a retail and entertainment conglomerate, to expand its presence in South Korea and beyond. Good to see people focusing on the East. Huge market out there who love the IP. Getting into some other price action, we've got CryptoPunks at 38.9, Bored Apes at 13.5, Mutants at 2.5, DGods at 2, Captains at 3, Azuki's at 5.1, down a few percent, Penguins at 11.8, Mad Lads still slipping, down another few percent to 62, and Noun's winning bid was at 7.1 ETH. Legendary, that is the price action. Those are the headlines. Is there anything catching your attention before we get into the bigger discussion today?
Yes, sir. If we take a look at the Mintify heat map, there is one massive green thing standing out, which makes me personally quite happy. It's a collection that we haven't seen for a long time. It's Wolfgame being up almost 90% on the day, being up 1,000% on over the last 7 days. Sheep were at a 0.029-ish floor. They are at a quarter of an ETH now. Wolves were down to 0.14, 0.15. Wolves floor is at 2 ETH now. There's a couple of reasons for that. Obviously, it's again the Blast effect. Wolfgame has, in a very smart move, in my opinion, decided to move to Blast and offer the Cave game as a game on Blast. Cave game used to be a pretty popular cave exploring game with a lot of game theory on how you want to use your sheep and wolves to explore that cave. Back then, with a price of I don't know how many million wool, which was quite a significant 6-figure amount of money to win back then. And they are running exactly that cave game back on Blast. And what certainly also did help the pump massively was Mooncat coming in with, I think it was a 22 ETH sweep yesterday, and posting about that.
Well, that's
And
going to
even
help.
after his massive sweep, people still came in and bought more of the assets. Also positively affected the land price, which is up significantly as well. And of course, the Wool token, Wool will be also migrated. Wool is up, did a 7x over the month, and I think is up, what is it, over the day, over the last 24 hours?
Yeah, so I've got the chart up for the people watching in. Last 24 hours up 80%, as you say. Last month up 660%.
And yeah, I mean, I've been playing Wolf Game, I've been playing Cave Game. Definitely ready to do that on Blast again, and definitely ready to farm that gold and share some of the strategies there.
For the people who are just listening, in, you've got to look at this chart. Like Wolf Game, kind of maybe this is an all-time high. No, okay. Oh no, it's miles.
Oh,
Oh
by
my god.
far not.
Okay, so the all-time high for Wool, which is the native currency for Wolf Game, was at 1.50 cents. My god. Okay, it spiked up at the beginning to 50 cents. Has obviously done what everything else did during the bear market. That was back in the bull market of 2021. It's gone all the way down to like 0.00 something in finding a bottom, and then has pumped in the last week on news of the Blast move. Obviously, a little bit of action before the announcement, as usual, when people know what's going to happen. Key question here before we go to Sammy and to hear what's catching his attention. Big question for me here, Legendary. Like, my instinctive reaction to this is like, when other people bridge from chain to chain, people might criticize and be like, oh, what's the point? Like, just stop bridging, just concentrate on where you are, build something properly. Like, if what you're building is good, like, it'll be fine. It doesn't necessarily matter where it is. Here, there's clearly been a huge difference made to both attention and price as a consequence of the decision to move to Blast. Is this good? Like, or does it maybe it doesn't matter if it's good or not, but like, should projects be doing this as a consequence? Like, is this going to make the game better or make more people play it and stay around for the long term? What's your thought on that?
If your challenge is to acquire users, to acquire players, and you just see a better product market fit on another chain, and Blast is certainly the gamblers, the degen chain, and has an excellent fit with what Wolf Game is, with a lot of game theory, with a lot of risk games being brought to the blockchain, it makes sense. Cambria did a similar thing. Cambria existed on Base before it existed on Blast. If you move around the PFP across various chains without having that advantage, that might not make the most sense. But also the argument there is, and you can say that for both DGods and Utes, that Frank has been trying to see if there might be a better community fit there and has been exploring with that. It just didn't work out in his favor. But I think you shouldn't necessarily be sticking to one chain if it just doesn't make sense for you any longer. You've seen it with Avagotchi, that they ported the Ghost token from Polygon to Base and decided that Base is now the new settlement layer. And for those who remember back in 2020, I think when they wanted to launch, initially they wanted to launch on mainnet, but mainnet had so high gas fees back then that for a game it didn't make sense. And now they moved to Base, and with the Base hype, I think their token price was up a 3x and has corrected obviously down from that a bit. But I do think that being a bit more chain agnostic, or even being multi-chain, if you're not like fractionalizing a user base and you manage to unite them cross-chain, is a good idea and is something to definitely consider. Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe it's a little bit like, I don't know. We've kind of used the analogies of different blockchains being cities, and if one city is not working out for you, no one's going to criticize you for trying another city, right? Like, sometimes the culture and environment and ecosystem, even within cities, can be different. Like, if you're a particular type of store and you set up in one part of the city, and that's just not where your clientele are, or not where the people who would like your product as much, you need to be in the right specific place. So maybe that is fair. I haven't thought about it too much. I'd love for it to be possible for it to be some type of pure meritocracy, where it's like, if your product is good, people will come to it wherever, but maybe that's too idealistic in some sense. Sammy, I don't know if you have an extra thought on that, or whether you want to take it straight to anything else that's been catching your attention.
I did notice the Wolf Game stuff, and being sort of deep into NFTs back in 2021. So the EtherOrc stuff back in October, I think it was October 11th or 12th, that minted, and then Wolf Game minted shortly after, probably a month later. So I have a lot of nostalgia with that, and I think that these sheep and wolves mint, like they ran up to, I think sheep went to like 13 ETH.
Yeah,
wolves went to like 20, some of them were like 25, 30, depending on what tier of wolf. So it's just interesting to see that come back. But I do think there was like a lot of headwinds for people to play originally on ETH because of the gas. And I know we've spoken about it's a feature, not a flaw, and all this kind of stuff. But realistically, if you want more people playing the protocol, I think Blast is a really good opportunity to get that additional layer of users to that particular game. And I think we've seen huge success with what Cambria has done. So I think it makes sense that these games coming over. I do kind of see a similarity with the Wall token and the Yield token. So I don't know, like I know they brought out where you could like lock up the Wall for a period of time, so effectively become like certificates of deposit, which was a really interesting mechanic. So it'd be interesting to see what DeFi or products that Wolfgame bring out on Blast, especially with the native yield. Like if you were to lock up native Wool on Blast, would you get yield as a holder of that, or like how would that work? So I think it could be they always seem to be pretty innovative with what they were doing. So that's what I'm excited to see on Blast with them specifically. And to be honest, that's gone.
Just a very quick comment on that to the craziness of Wolf Game back in the day, back in 2021. You mentioned Wolves being at 25, 30 ETH, and Wolves had like different tiers, Alpha 1 to Alpha 8, I think. And back then, I was part of a DAO where we wanted to purchase one of the most powerful Wolves, and I think we went up all the way to 500 ETH to offer that to be one of the like captains of another game that they had going on back at the time. So it was absolutely crazy. But I also think that a lot of the community still exists. A lot of those people who are bullish on Wolf Game have shifted a bit to Infinigods as well, because those two gaming communities have a good amount of overlap. And it will definitely be interesting to see if they all together will now move on to Blast and explore other things, but also how like the already existing player base of Blast will adopt to that and will play Wolf Game, or if that's just not going to be the case and it will be just the OG Wolf Game players running it back once again.
I think it's an interesting point, because I'm already chatting to the EtherOrcs team, where it's now a DAO, but they're looking for alternatives outside of Polygon. So that was originally on there. They were considering Base, but I think they are actually now genuinely considering Blast as an option, and to have like the OG on-chain first RPG to be brought to Blast. I think that's quite a cool claim to fame. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens, and whether this kind of starts a surge of other games that are kind of from back in 2021 being revived, whether it's like Eternal Elves or a lot of these other things that might end up shipping to Blast. And all of a sudden you've got a lot more activity on the chain, and it kind of benefits everyone's with the gas fee rebates, more assets on there, more TVL. So yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Very, very interesting stuff. A final point for you, Sam, was there something that was catching your attention as we're looking at the kind of NFT market on the Mintify heat map, or not?
So there was one that we failed to mention yesterday when Zen was on. So his collection minted on the Blaster collection. So that's on the Blast side of the Mintify heat map. Cool. So that came out. So I think people ended up having it significantly above floor. So I don't know whether that was just during the mint, and then it just eventually came down to the redemption price. But that was something that caught my attention. Outside of that, there's a bit of up and down, but to be honest, I think there's not really too much notable to mention outside of just typical blur farming.
Yeah, fair enough. Just like completely random, like red numbers with really high numbers, like down 40%, up 20%, and none of it really is material, I don't think. Okay, that's very helpful. Nice to stop in there to get a sense of things that are catching your attention. We want to I think we might do this slightly different order today because might want to end on the bigger conversations. I don't have a huge amount to say on these news items, but we want to tick them off. So we're going to hit the news items like back to back quite quickly. I know from his tweet that Concierge Physician has a question on one of them. So maybe Legendary, we can get him up to ask a question after we go through it. Let's get through it. Let's maybe start with that first piece of news about the CME Group to launch the Bitcoin spot trading. Legendary, I think you're going to take this.
Yeah, absolutely. CME Group, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, being the world's largest future exchange, where you can already trade BTC futures, is allegedly planning to launch Bitcoin trading as for the spot market. I say allegedly because this all started based on a report by the Financial Times. And at least to my current knowledge, the CME declined to comment yet on that. Why is this a relevant piece of news? CME obviously caters to massive institutional money, to hedge funds who do a lot of trading volume there. According to that Financial Times article, the CME has about 26,000 open positions right now, worth around $8.5 billion on its market in Chicago alone. That's more than double the amount a year ago. And the point that this article is obviously making is that a lot of those institutional investors, institutions have long-standing, long-lasting relationships with the CME that go back years, if not even decades, and they're well more willing to engage in trading there, whether that is, offering futures or selling futures and buying the underlying asset to speculate on that price gap a bit. And they are way more trusting to do that on an institution like CME versus heading to Coinbase to achieve a similar thing.
Okay. I think that sounds pretty fair. Excellent summary. Thank you very much for that, Legendary. Let's go straight to Concierge Physician. I believe you have a question on this, a comment. Welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts?
Hey, thanks, guys. I love your daily summaries. Sorry, I'm on a treadmill, so thanks for having me up. So a couple things. I've been in Bitcoin since 2017. As you recall, there was the CME that came in December 2018. Most of you on stage probably remember this. And everyone was calling for the moon. And what happened? Bitcoin went from 20K to 10K. So my question is, I guess I have a couple. What's the difference between that time, where I guess quote unquote was manipulated, it dropped 50%, and the CME this time? Sort of like when BlackRock came in. Sure. I put a tweet out a while back. When BlackRock came in, it's almost like sell the news, right? So I sold some around 70K. As you recall, it dropped to 59. I bought some more back. But part of the question, and I want to hear everyone on the stage that are much smarter than me, is, when it dropped obviously 50%, and then obviously same thing happened with BlackRock. What is the issue here? Like, what's the difference? And the other part, there is a CME gap around 20,000. The prior CME gap was 24,000 when Bitcoin, as you know, came down to about 15, 16K. I loaded up around there. It stayed down for a little while. And then, of course, I sold some on the way up. So there is a CME gap. Do you guys get concerned about that? Can you enlighten me about this CME versus the 2018 December CME? Sorry, I'm out of breath. I'm going to be on silence.
Did a great job of getting those comments out whilst also exercising. Legendary, I think maybe you want to come in on this first. Maybe Sammy, if you want to as well.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't do that show while being on a treadmill. Just maybe for a bit more context or clarity for everyone else in the audience who's not as deep in that. And I also think that NFT Stats had a very, very good post on that when we recently saw the timeline celebrating that Millennium is buying up a $2 billion position in BTC, which would make it 3% of the fund. And a lot of commenters were saying that, hey, you are bearish and they are buying $2 billion. And NFT Stats made the very good point that Millennium is a very market neutral fund. So he's pretty sure that while they're buying BTC on the one hand, they are also short on Bitcoin futures on the CME, which if you have both those things going on, you have a market neutral position that has pretty low risk. It's a good arbitrage opportunity. And Stats made the point that by doing that, you do generate double-digit APY. So this is also the thinking there, that institutional money coming in and be able to do both spot and future trading on the CME and not needing two different like avenues to do that, would be inclined to position themselves in that way. And not everyone buying via the CME would necessarily be long only, because some would go for that arbitrage. As for the question on the 2017 data versus the 2024 for the CME gap, I would honestly have to look into that, because I just don't have those numbers in my head anymore.
Fair enough. I hope that his perspective is helpful, but I know Funky's got his hand raised as well. Maybe he'll have an additional take. Funky, welcome to the stage, my friend. What are your thoughts on the CME news?
GME, everybody. Yeah, I think Legendary covered a lot of it. I was just going to say to the doc, I mean, really the big difference is that was futures where, there's really no Bitcoin actually being traded. So it's much easier to move the market versus when you're talking about spot, actually somebody's having to buy or sell the actual Bitcoin underneath it. So that's, I think, the big thing, the big difference. But Legendary made all the other good points.
Okay. Fair enough. I think that's dealt with. As I said, I want to move slightly quicker through the headlines today, because we've got some more interesting points of discussion. Frankly, I didn't love the headlines today. Didn't love them at all. Feel like we can just knock them out. Next headline was the US Senate voting 60-38 to overturn the SEC's anti-crypto rule. Probably quite significant, but just not one that I was in love with for whatever particular reason, the way I woke up this Friday. So the Senate has voted 60-38 to overturn it. It's a rule that discourages financial institutions from being custodians of digital assets like Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. I guess the important point to note is this was a bipartisan decision, even though President Biden had said not long ago that he would veto it. So I guess the ball now is back in their court. The decision marks the first time Congress has passed standalone crypto legislation and represents a significant victory for the crypto industry. So I think that is broadly good news to see that kind of battle maybe being won, at least on some level. Funky, official US correspondent, put a bow on this topic for us, please.
Yeah, just real quick. It was hardly bipartisan. All 48 of the Republicans had voted aye. 12 of the Democrats wrote rank to vote aye to get this passed. And this really could be something big, because if Biden does veto it, this could have major political ramifications. And there's also a famous clip going around of Elizabeth Warren arguing for why people should reject it. I'll try and find it, put it in the comments below. But this could be very, very big.
Okay, sounds very good. We have to hear, given that it is a financial type of news, the official modern market accountant. Sammy, what's your take on this?
Well, from an accounting standpoint, what SAB 121 tries to do is effectively bring custodians' assets, or like assets that don't belong to those particular custodians, onto their balance sheet, and that's just not right. Like you can't record those liabilities and assets if you don't own them, and that's pretty much the general consensus globally. So I think if this was to be passed, there would be further differences in accounting treatment for the US versus the rest of the world for a start. And that's fine. There's adjustments that you can make, etc., when you consolidate at the global level. But yeah, it just why would you make that painful for yourself? It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, from an accounting standpoint, it just like substance over form just doesn't make sense.
Okay. Sounds like it's a step in the right direction, or at least a step in the kind of more commonsensical direction. Legendary, any final reflections on that, or shall we keep it moving?
Let's keep it moving.
Nice. Okay, final headline. Pudgy Penguins announced strategic partnership with Lot Group, South Korean conglomerate. I'm just going to throw to you straight away, Sammy. Any thoughts on this? Big news. So they had Target. So they've had Walmart first. They had Target after that. Now they're partnering with pretty significant retailers in South Korea. Any headline takes?
Well, I think they're absolutely crushing the partnerships. Was the GameStop one? Was that actually a partnership or was that a troll?
No, I think that was. I
That was
think
legit.
actually, to be fair, it might have been a troll. I don't know.
Yeah, because I thought that the timing on that was pretty immaculate. So yeah, I think they're absolutely killing it for what they're doing, and they're really taking it to the next level outside of our little crypto bubble. So kudos to them. I think that I have heard rumors that there's other stuff in the pipeline that's quite significant. So it'd be interesting to see if that comes to fruition. I can't talk about it now because I don't know to what extent it's public and what's not. But yeah, I think they're absolutely killing it. So that's my headline take. And I don't know too much about Lot Group though. I know that I think Animoca is actually breaking into South Korea as well. So there's obviously a market there that people want to be sort of present in. And I know they've got an Animoca Japan, which they're making multiple visits to. So yeah, there could be a market that everyone's trying to tap into.
I can fill in a bit on the Lotte Group, which has a very German-sounding name, and that's not a coincidence because the founder was a big fan of Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, the German poet, and named it after Lotte, one of the characters in the Sorrows of Young Werther.
What?
Or Werther. Yes, indeed.
Name.
I looked that up because I was like, this name sounds too German for a Korean conglomerate. Anyhow, basically, they do almost everything. They have loads and loads of beverage brands, foods. They own a couple IT and advisory companies. They own shopping malls that they operate in South Korea and China and Russia. They own multiple chain of hotels, car rentals, station building companies, as well as entertainment companies, as well as an insurance company. So it's a pretty diversified and massive conglomerate.
Pretty cool. I actually, for a second, thought you actually knew that off the top of your head, that was the original reason why that company's name what it was. Still kind of impressive for interesting additional detail. Okay, we're going to hit the Web3 roundup a little bit early today because we want to get into a bigger discussion straight after that. This is everything else that you need to know from the market from the past 24 hours. Number one, meme coin maker Pump.fun compromised for around $2 million now. That seems to be the number agreed upon. Bit volatile yesterday, trying to decide how much was taken. I believe that is the number, at least as things stand. That's what people have accounted for. Number two, Chainlink completes test with JP Morgan, Templeton, BNY Mellon, and other major US banks to accelerate the tokenization of funds. That sounds quite good. Next, Athena announces reduction in protocol yield, meaning staked USD APY has now risen to 37.2 ETH. Remember, Athena is the synthetic dollar, one that I've found quite interesting, not without risk, but certainly something I've been kind of looking into and interested in as they try to create some type of synthetic dollar. And finally, DeGods announced art upgrades are dead. They said they have scrapped DeGods Season 3.33 and Utes 2. There will be no more official art upgrades moving forward. A few more points from around the news. Content creator Gem was featured in headline piece in mainstream crypto media Decrypt. That was pretty fun to see. Like literally front and center of their main website. That was awesome to see. Next, Yuga Labs Superpunk World was announced. It's the first Yuga Labs co-created collection of 500-piece digital avatars. That's pretty interesting to note. It's hand curated by Nina Chanel, who is the kind of what's the word? Inaugural punk in residence, the artist in residence, basically at Yuga Labs at CryptoPunks at the moment. And finally, I just had to include this in because it's too mind-blowing. I'm sure there's some kind of technological link to everything else that we care about. Neuralink is accepting applications for the second telepathy cybernetic brain implant participant. Elon Musk tweeted that Neuralink is accepting applications for the second participant. This is our telepathy cybernetic brain implant that allows you to control your phone and computer just by thinking.
That would be such a cheat code in Fantasy Top. Imagine how many tweets you could crank out like that.
I mean, kind of a cheat code in everything. Although Sammy messaged me to say if I would be applying, and I said no. Where are we going to draw the line here, Sammy? Are you drawing the line? Would you be interested?
Well, I was thinking in a relationship, it'd be amazing because then you could just know what the partner wants from you.
That would be terrible. Think of all the terrible things that you think.
Yeah,
and then they won't know.
but say, and I'm saying this just because I can see JC in the YouTube comments. So I'm just saying, yeah. But I think that if she was like, okay, well, I told you to do the dishes, and I'd be like, well, you just told me anyway. So you just telepathied it. So at least I know that I need to do it. Whereas if she says she's told me but hasn't told me, then there you go. So I think it would make things a lot smoother.
Shout out to JC in the comments. Great points, Sammy. You're making some great points there. Good stuff. Right, we wanted to get into the bigger topics today, which I found this thread, which I just found hilarious / interesting, and kind of made me second guess what I've been thinking and doing, and the way we intellectualize all of our trading, and we try to come up with hypotheses and thinking and all this type of stuff. I found this amazing thread which my friend LG put out. He's the kind of creator at the First Mint, which is like a sports newsletter. Came up during the Top Shot era and kind of continued. Really good guy, and he tweeted this. I'm going to share it on screen for the people watching in, and I definitely want your guys' reactions and kind of reflection as well. Maybe I'll ask you the question before we look at the answers, but he shared this post where he said the replies on this 2021 post and just put a popcorn emoji. And it was basically a question from Loopify where he said, fast forward 1 year. This was written on July the 3rd, 2021. He said, fast forward 1 year. What 3 projects are you investing in now that you believe will stay relevant this time next year? So this was peak bull market, right? Peak bull market, July the 3rd, 2021, where Loopify put out the question, like, what are you in that's going to still be great in only 1 year's time? Like, what are you thinking here? Legendary, Sammy, before we look at the comments, and just so you know, my comment to this tweet was, holy my God, let us never forget this. Because I read through the comments of what people were suggesting. And then the question is going to be in a second, what are we in now that we think is so good and is not going to be good in the same way? But what are you thinking? Take us back to 2021. What were some of the things that you were wildly bullish on and then disappeared?
So I think that I was trying to think what was actually minted by July 2021. I think the Doge pound might have been.
Doge pound.
The Doge pound, yeah. So that was around about the same time as Cool Cats. That I bought that for 3 ETH. I think it's trading at 0.01 or something now, something savage like that. But there's a number of projects that weren't minted there that wouldn't be on there. Obviously, Bored Apes, Punks, probably still on there. But yeah, I think like Cool Cats, Deadfellas, Doge Pounds.
Let's go through. I want to go through some of this, and the reason why we go through it is that it's illustrative of how wrong people can be, just in general. Even with the best intent, people can be good people. It's not a knock on these projects necessarily. It's just this was an investment question, right? Like, what 3 projects are you investing in now that you believe will stay relevant? Here we go. Let's go through some of the things. So we've got Nate Rivers, very prominent trader actually. Cyberkongs, Axie Infinity, and VFriends. Anonymous, who did a pretty decent shout. Punks, Xcopy, and then another artist, the Sarah Zucker. Daniel G said Punks Comic, NBA Top Shot, VV Official.
That's my bags. Hurts pretty much.
Bored Ape and Gutter Cat Gang from Irina. Someone said Manifold, Artifact, and Genies. Do you remember Genies? Art Blocks, Known Origin, who are now shut down. Super Rare, Art Blocks, also Art Blocks. I don't even know if Art Blocks has continued minting. I know they took a bit of a time out to try and figure out their supply dynamics. Ethlings, Punks Comic, Wicked Craniums. Wicked Craniums is actually still going, to be fair. I know a good friend of the show, Rahim from Dubai, absolutely loves Wicked Craniums and Art Blocks. But I guess the point of scrolling through this, we've got Ghost, Cool Cats, Art Blocks. Legendary, when you're seeing all of these kind of blasts from the past back, I guess the key question I was kind of it made me start reflecting on is like, what are we in now that we think is going to be amazing that is not? And in a way, that's an impossible question to answer, right? Because we obviously are invested in things that we are invested in because we think they're going to be good. But clearly, according to this list, when you see like we've got other things like Zrun, Top Shot, just the routine, genuine undead, Azuki. Okay, they've got some.
Oh, Pack is painful.
Pack, the artist Pack, who was selling things at outrageous prices, right? Like, what's your reflection here? Like, what do you take away from this?
I mean, on a more serious note, first on a lighter note, basically every single project I've seen on there I had invested in, I had bags in that. I think one of my very early learnings was to just, I mean, I know it sounds so simple, but to try to be less delusional and take profits when everything goes up in a straight line. And my first learning was NBA Top Shot, where it just was in a closed beta, and I was able to throw in a couple $100, a couple $1,000, run it up to a 1% collection, top collection that was worth a couple $100K. And then my thing was, I'm just going to run it up another couple multiples to $1 million, then I'm going to sell. Obviously never happened. So that was a very early lesson to that. But on a more serious note, like, humans are terrible at predicting the future, but I also find that kind of articles, and again, that's not about dunking on anyone, because nobody can extrapolate the present and predict the future by that. But I find those articles so interesting when you had, I don't know, former IBM CEO, don't quote me on the decade, was it the 40s, was it the 60s, saying that nobody's going to need a home computer, a computer at home. It's just fine when we have a couple of them around the world. Then same with the car. There's never going to be enough professional drivers to drive around people, so we don't need more than a couple thousand cars in every country. We are terrible. Then you have those illustrations of people in the early 20s trying to predict how the world will look like in the 21st century. A lot of that is flying cars and stuff like that, which, I mean, it's kind of happening with like those autonomous taxis that also can fly. But we are terrible at predicting the future, but it's still so interesting to see how we imagine that. And I think to turn that point back to crypto, I think we're starting to see a bit of gaming fatigue already with that big gaming narrative, which I'm also like very heavily invested in. And I think a lot of people were thinking that a lot of these games will just make it and there will be enough demand for them, and that we will basically hit one game that breaks into mainstream and brings along mass adoption for Web3 gaming altogether, which is one narrative that I'm probably not as bullish anymore as I used to be at the start of the year. I do still think that some games will do a tremendous job, but it's not that mass onboarding event that we were hoping for, very similarly to how we hoped for the Coinbase NFT marketplace back in the day to onboard the masses.
Yeah, exactly. It's that type of thing, right? And I think the way, because I always think one of the most interesting questions IRL, like in the real world, that I ask myself sometimes is like, when you look back at the past, you always look back and think, well, that was a really crazy thing that people were doing. And then I try to think, well, what will be the equivalent? Because we will be doing things right here, right now, that will be viewed as completely absurd or ludicrous or stupid or immoral even in 15, 20, 30 years time. And like, what kinds of things are those? But in terms of from the investing perspective, I guess that question still kind of persists, right? Because it's like, what will be considered completely wild? I guess, Legendary, you're touching on like the Web3 gaming sector as one where we might look back and be like, hang on a sec, we were pretty deluded there potentially. Sammy, do you have any thoughts as to this? More bringing it up as like I don't know, this question really got me thinking the last few days. Like, am I doing anything dumb? Like, am I doing anything dumb right here, right now?
I think the whole meme coin super cycle, people are writing papers on that. Tokenized culture, like, we're trying to justify that. Maybe like we're saying that in 10 years time, some of these dog coins are going to still be worth multi-billions. That could potentially be something that we're a little bit misguided on. I don't know. I still do believe that will stick around just because you have so many people in it. But thinking about being in that position 10 years from now and looking back, I just don't know whether that would have the same staying power, because you might alternate through that attention cycle that no one in that era resonates with what happened on the internet in this era. So then maybe culture shifts. So that could potentially be one. I do think that gaming just makes sense though, like having NFTs where you can take stuff out. I think my only concern with it is whether you have these incumbent publishers that are like, no, we don't want to do that because you're going to take revenue away from us. Therefore, we're going to do everything we can to keep it shut down. So I think there's going to be huge headwinds for that. And maybe timelines are skewed for gaming or blockchain gaming to maybe be delayed a little bit longer. Because obviously with Steam and I guess Microsoft and these other big players, unless they integrated themselves, or like, was it Minecraft putting a ban on saying they'll never integrate NFTs, and then NFT worlds went to zero and then came back as Hytopia. But like, I think that there is some potential there because it just makes sense as like a product market fit. But then I do think that there's a lot of incumbents within these industries that have reason to prevent that from coming into fruition. And it's the same with like the asset managers. I know Vanguard recently was like, we're going to take an anti-crypto stance, and that makes sense for them because most of their clients are in the upper age bracket. They have no interest in crypto, so why would you piss off that particular clientele? So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see the incentives as to why people would or wouldn't want things pushed through, and I think that's ultimately going to decide on the success of a lot of these sub-segments of the industry.
Interesting stuff. Maybe I want to hear from Legendary again on maybe thinking about like how to start predicting better then. Like if we're kind of acknowledging that we do so poorly, I don't know, a high proportion of times, how are you thinking about doing better at that? But just before that, I would love to bring NFT Stats into the conversation. We've had him up here for a while. I want to bring him in and ask how you think about this. How do you think we predict better, given that so often we predict so poorly?
All right, sorry, B-Check, with me, you got to give a little more context. Predict what? I've been in and out of this conversation. I'm really sorry.
The markets and investing. We just went through a bunch of like old 2021 predictions where people were like, what are the things that I've invested in that are going to be great in 1 year's time? And there's just a whole list of things that are like so far off.
Yeah.
Do you have any reflections on like?
Look, I mean, I worked in investment research for 8 years at Goldman Sachs, where your job is to predict the future. And what ends up happening in that industry is everyone basically just kind of predicts that the future price is going to be current price plus or minus 15 to 20%. And people just end up going safe. And, because it's just the safest way to play. And then what ends up happening is like the sell side, which are the people who are writing research reports that they're making public and that are predicting the future, end up being perceived in the industry as the dumb ones by the buy side, which are the hedge funds, the Millenniums, the Citadels, the Franklin Templeton, like the guys who have to make the decisions. There's almost like this thing where it's like the buy side, the people who are putting the money to work versus the people writing research reports. The buy side are the ones who are considered the smart ones. But I think what's really happening is they're just the ones who don't have to publish their research because it's impossible to predict the future. It is so hard to predict the future. And that's kind of like, at the same time though, so there are two strategies over there. One is just to always be within 10 to 15%. No one really notices. And you make your brand off other things like how good of a salesperson you are and stuff like that. And then every now and then you just have an analyst who just throws caution to the wind and calls for like 80% upside in China steel stocks. And like, I think that makes them superheroes for a while. It's just a little bit riskier for your career. I've seen it here. Like I've been trying to predict these gold prices. Next thing you know, Jackpot gets released. Next thing you know, he delays the season by a month. But whatever. Like for me, I just kind of wear it on my sleeve. I'm just like, it's hard to predict the future. I'm the one who's out there predicting something that's basically impossible. As the facts change, like L2s go down 50%, I'm going to change my numbers because I think that's a bit of a proxy, and it's impossible to predict if L2s are going to go up or down. I mean, one of my favorite things, and a few people are saying like, oh, this delay was just because they want the markets to recover. I'm like, you think that these guys are predicting ETH price over 26 days to make any difference, as though it's not just as likely to go down as it is to go up? It's like we're just systematically very, very bad at predicting the future, I think. And like there are areas you can do it, but when it comes to these assets where there are literally millions and millions of people trading, like it's a lot of coin flips out there. Now that doesn't mean people can't get stuff right, and I think that's why I think it's more interesting to look at a guy like Cyrus, who's out there trying to arbitrage the market. who's out there not trying to make bets on what's going to go up or down, but trying to find like inefficiencies in the market. Like, can I buy apes off the floor and short on Parispace and see if there are like grails you can get from people dumping? Like, you can JPEG Morgan does that too, fancy. Like, there are trades you can that I think, and that's, you know, we talked about Millennium. That's what Millennium does. Millennium has no illusion that they can predict Bitcoin prices. Zero illusion. They literally are just like, oh, CME futures are trading at a 12% premium. Let's lever up and put that trade on versus Bitcoin, and we'll never lose money. So I don't know. It's a bit of a ramble.
That's super interesting, man. Thanks so much for sharing. The one thing I'm going to take away from that and think about more, which I definitely believe to be true after working in a corporate law firm for a period of time as well, is that unwillingness to rock the boat when you have to put yourself out there. Like, when you have to put your name to that document in whatever professional environment that you're in, you just don't want other people to criticize you too aggressively or to rock the boat. So I'm going to think about that.
I worked for a guy named Tim Moe. He was the head of Asia strategy at Goldman Sachs, and I was doing derivative research. And like, listening to this guy write or talk, it was the most boring thing ever, because he would literally just be like, yeah, we think China can go up 15% over the next year. It's like, based on volatility, that is like just an irrelevant thing to say. Like, a 15% move it's like saying Bitcoin's going to go up 15% in 3 years. Like, based on the volatility of Bitcoin, that's basically saying it's doing nothing, you know. But he had the strategy of like, I'm going to win by being likable, by getting to know my clients, by being the person who remembers their birthday. Like, that was his strategy. And then the guy who did China Steel would be up there being like, China's going to double, like, in the next 3 weeks, you got to buy. And like, everyone fucking loved when he got on the call. People would like cheer for him. But then, you know, I think eventually, you know, you call it to double and it goes down 80%, you lose people money and you feel terrible. So
very, very interesting. I'm definitely going to reflect on that, because I think there's a parallel to creators, like who on the timeline is posting for the likes, for the engagement, for all that type of stuff, and who's posting for the core content. I want to reflect on that.
I think in our game, like, putting yourself out there is better. I don't think anyone wants that's just a view. I don't think there's any value in the game we're playing in just being pure safe. But
yeah,
that's just
Legendary. I know you want to come in on this. Let's close out with your final takes.
Yeah, one more point on predictions and a book recommendation with that. Book recommendation is the book Super Forecasting, The Art and Science of Prediction. And it goes into a lot of notes on how vague and arbitrary we are with predicting things, and even how unclear our language is of predicting things, citing examples from intelligence services when they say that something has a serious possibility of happening, but not attaching a percentage to that. And then they did, for example, do a study on that. What did the intelligence service mean by that? What did people understand by that? What is the general population thinking on that? And the answers ranged from a 20 to an 80% probability of something that has a serious possibility to happen. And in that case, it was, I think the intelligence service meant serious possibility is 20%. And most of the people who heard that information and based a decision on that thought it's like 60 to 80%. And this is where, like, with predictions, with predictions, you can be like very, very vague if you don't attach a percentage to it. And there's a lot of misunderstanding happening. But I found that to be a very, very interesting read on exactly like the unclarity of predictions that we're making.
That's awesome. That's really interesting to think about. And as a final point, before we close out, like, remember when I did my first angel investment this year, or at the end of last year, one of the things I did was go through all the potential outcomes. It was like, this could trade higher. That is one possibility. This could trade the same. That's one possibility. It could trade lower. Those are three possibilities. There is also a fourth possibility. They could rug and this thing could completely disappear. So that was like, and then I attached a percentage to all of those things. So I think that is very interesting to bring up the percentage stuff, because I don't know, by going through that exercise, I felt way more confident on placing the bet. Because, like, even if I'm wrong, I've run the like, I feel like I've run the numbers. I could have run the numbers wrong and seen the world incorrectly, but I felt way more confident doing something like that. Is that what you're kind of alluding to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, probabilistic thinking, again, could be another show that we fill on that, but attaching like clear numbers to your scenarios is so very important, especially if you communicate them to others.
Interesting stuff, guys.
just one thing I was going to throw in is like, for me, like on like these gold prediction prices, the reason I even started doing this is because I realized that there are only 3 things you have to guess in order to get it right. So I was just putting that framework out there. I was like, guys, everyone's talking about points. These are the only, like, what's your view on valuation? Here's where arbitrage is. Here's where optimism is. Okay, what's your view? This is how much gold is out. This is like, so I always felt at least like, I'm not like doing probabilistic stuff. I'm like putting my estimates out there, but at least I'm saying, this is the formula. You figure out what you think based on these things. Now, obviously, that's asking a lot of your reader, right? But I think just putting that, like, this is how I got to where I got is like, that for me at least, like, that's why I don't lose sleep over this one.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Well, man, we really appreciate you putting it out. Definitely really, really helpful for people to see the final conclusion, but as well as the method behind it. Super, super helpful. Guys, that's the close of the show today. We hope it was interesting. As you could tell, I don't really like the headlines today, so I wanted to go a little bit through them quicker and go into this kind of deeper discussion on stuff. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, as always, to my legendary co-hosts, Legendary and Sammy. Thank you to our contributors, NFT Stats, Oxy, Funky, and Tiro on stage with us. And thank you so much for joining. We hope you have a wonderful weekend. Take care, and we will see you back here on Monday. Bye-bye.